Hello, I'm Ray Harmony and this is the Hack Music Theory Show. 1 week ago we introduced our new series, Give Writer's Block That Finger. We launched this to celebrate reaching 10,000 subscribers on YouTube. Since then, we've strengthened our music theory revolution even more, and we're now an unbelievable 30,000 people strong. Wow! Thank you, and yeah, music theory. Okay, let's get into the studio because today I'm going to be showing you a completely different approach to overcoming that debilitating fear of blank screens. I'm going to be showing you how to give writer's block that finger by dialing a bass line. But first, two. Now, I don't often quote old dead Greek dudes, but I'm going to make an exception because it's a special day, and I like you. So, Pythagoras used to say, all is number. What he meant by this was that he believed everything in the universe could be explained through numbers. And I believe a very similar thing. I believe all is music. So while Pythagoras believed that anything and everything could be turned into numbers, I know for a fact that anything and everything can be turned into music. And seeing and hearing the world as music is the ultimate cure for writer's block. And surely it's gotta be the most fun and fascinating way to live as well. Now, there's numerous ways to turn people and places and things into music, so this dial-a-bassline hack is barely even scratching the surface of what's possible with this approach to the world. So yeah, we'll be doing more videos with this concept and showing other ideas, but for now, this is how you dial a bassline. Step 1. Think of a family member or a friend or even a foe, or a place or a company, anyone, anywhere, anything that you've recently had a connection to or an interaction with that made you feel something powerful. And we're going to use that feeling as our starting point. Alright, let's get to it. So we are going into the piano roll, our favorite place to be. We've got 3 bars set up and ready to go. We are going to write a 2-bar bass line, and we're going to use this 3rd bar over here as our working area. So this is going to be where we're going to put our menu of notes that we can choose from. But before we start choosing our notes, we obviously need to choose our mode. And this is where we need to take the feeling we had from that interaction or that connection, and we need to find the mode that conveys that that emotion so we can turn that experience into music. So if you had a positive experience, you're going to be using one of the major modes, and if you had a negative experience, you're going to be using one of the minor modes. And then just before we get to which specific major mode or minor mode to choose, let's get the grid set to 8th notes so we can start drawing in our menu in that 3rd bar here. And we're going to be using the white note hack, which keeps things super simple because we don't have to use any black notes, so there's no sharps or flats. And then once we're done writing, we can always just select all the MIDI and move it up or down to wherever we want. Okay, so if your experience was positive and left you feeling happy, almost with this childlike innocence, no strings attached, nothing else, just that, then you want to be using Ionian, aka the major scale, and that's what you get when you play all the white notes with C as your root. So in other words, C as your home. Okay, so you can go and put in C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and then C. So that is your menu to choose from for that happy, innocent emotion. Right, if your experience was happy, but in a more mature, balanced, almost adult-like way, Then what I want you to do is this exact same thing, all the white notes, except I want you to start from G. And that gives you the Mixolydian mode. And then if your experience was uplifting and happy, but in a kind of weird, surreal, dreamy, quirky kind of way, then I want you to use all the white notes starting from F, and that gives you the Lydian mode. Okay, so those are your three options for positive experiences. And then on the minus side, so if you're turning a negative experience into your baseline, if the experience was straight up sad, I want you to use all the white notes starting from A, and that gives you the Aeolian mode, aka the natural minor scale. If your experience was sad but hopeful, then I want you to use all the white notes starting from D. That gives you the Dorian mode. If your experience was rather uncomfortable and dark, then I want you to use all the white notes starting from E, and that gives you the Phrygian mode. And then finally, if your experience was scary as hell, then I want you to use all the white notes starting from B, and that gives you the Locrian mode, which is that horror movie soundtrack favorite. Okay, so for this example, I'm actually going to use Ionian, the major scale, which is what I've got here. So all the white notes from C as the root. And the reason for this is because all this talk about menus and ordering has made me hungry, and that's got me thinking about our favorite restaurant here in Victoria, which is Lotus Pond. It's this incredible like little family owned Chinese restaurant. Oh, so yummy. Anyways, our experience of hanging out there and eating and chatting with the family is always positive, and we always leave feeling happy and uplifted. So naturally, I'm gonna turn my favorite restaurant into a baseline. Step 2. Phone number. So if this interaction or connection was with someone you know, then get on your phone, scroll through, get their phone number. If this interaction or connection was with a company or organization or place or whatever, then get on Google and get the phone number, because we are going to dial a baseline with that phone number. So let me go over to Google. Hello Google. Alright, so Lotus Pond. Alright, here we go. Oh yeah, look at that yummy food. Okay, so here we go. Call us at 250-380-9293. This is what we're going to do. We are going to turn that phone number into the baseline. And the way we're going to do that is by interpreting the numbers as spelling. So in other words, each number corresponds with the number of the scale. So 2 is going to be the second note in the scale, 5 is the fifth note in the scale, and wherever you have a 0, it's going to be a rest. So that's going to create phrasing. The most important thing to remember for this dial a baseline hack is that when you call a different area code, so here in Canada and the States, like when we call a different area code, we have to put a 1 before the phone number, and that is it's a total coincidence, but it's awesome for this hack because 1 is the root note, and without the root note you cannot establish the scale, the mode that you're in, and everything falls to pieces. Alright, and without further ado, here comes the Lotus Pond baseline. So we've already discussed we need to start with the 1. So this is the 1 here, the C. So let's get in C for as long as you want. We're going to change rhythm later, so it doesn't matter anyway. And then we've got 250. So this is obviously the first note of the scale. That's the second note of the scale. So we need a 2, and then 3, 4, 5. Okay, and then 0. So that's going to be a rest. What I'd recommend for rests is to put a note in and then mute it, just so you don't end up later getting rid of that rest when you start moving the rhythm around. So then we've got 380. So 1, 2, 3. This is our third note here, and and 8 is obviously an octave higher. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so that is C, an octave higher. And then we've got a 0. So once again, put a note in and mute it so that rest is protected. So that's going to keep those phrasing marks there for us. Okay, and then we've got a 9293, and this is going to be such a cool thing because the 9 obviously comes around again because we've only got 7 notes. When you get from C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C up to that top C, that becomes the 8, right? Which means if that's the 8, then the 9 is going to be the 2. Okay, so we just go around like that. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then the 8 is the 1, and the 9 is the 2. And that 9 just represents the fact that it is an octave higher. So the same way the 8 represents the fact that it's the root but an octave higher. So in other words, we do want that D, but we want it an octave higher. Okay, so that is our 9, and then it was 2, so that's the same note an octave lower, and then it was 9 again, and then the 3. And that is our phone number. So 250-380-9293. And this hack actually comes from this weird thing I've done my whole life. I remember phone numbers as melodies, and you know, I do the same with all numbers. So like my pen number for my bank card, which I won't won't be doing a YouTube video on that, but so any number in my life I always I've just always remembered as melodies, because there's no forgetting it once you've attached a melody to you know, or once you've turned that number into a melody, it's stuck in your head. You won't forget it. Alright, anyway, that's enough about my weird brain. So this is the starting point for our bass line. But instead of just kind of being lazy and saying, okay, well, there you go, it's done, we still need to add the rhythm to make it come to life. But before we can do that, we need to strengthen any of the kind of boring intervals, because this is like a random way of creating a melody. So we need to now go in and make it the best it can be. And if you've watched some of these videos before, you'll know that perfect fourths, which are the intervals of 5 semitones, and perfect fifths, which are the interval of 7 semitones, those intervals vibrate so similarly that when you go from one note up or down a perfect fourth or fifth to the next note in a melody, it's actually a really boring and colorless melodic movement, because those notes are just too similar to each other. So what we do is we throw a note in between those two notes to break up that perfect fourth or fifth, and what you end up with is 2 strong colorful intervals where previously you just had one boring colorless interval. So that's what we're going to be doing now, and that brings me to step 3. Fix those boring perfect fourth and perfect fifth melodic intervals. So you need to go through your phone number bass line now, and check wherever you have the interval of 5 semitones or 7 semitones, and we're going to get something in between that. So you can see over here from the D to the G, that's a perfect fourth, that's 5 semitones. So we need a note in between that. Now, because the bass line is already done, we can delete that third bar. So we can use that extra space to just pull our bass line over while we insert the extra notes in between those perfect fourth and fifth intervals. Alright, so this is also one of those cool things with when you're breaking up a perfect fourth or a perfect fifth. You know, we're going from D up to G, so most people would think like, well, I'll put a note in between those, in the middle somewhere, you know, like F or something. it's actually and you know, sometimes that's great, but on the other hand, it's fun to be creative and think outside of the box and kind of think, if you're going from, you know, D up to a G, instead of doing something in the middle, it's like you could go in the wrong direction first. So you go D and then down and then up to the G, or you can go from the D and you shoot way past it above, and then come down to the G. So, you know, it's fun to play around with different ways of inserting a note in between those perfect fourth and fifth intervals, and that's kind of really where you end up with a melody that you would never have written on your own if you just kind of left it as it is. So this is kind of that amazing you know, randomness, where the music just writes itself. So super fun. Anyway, okay, so what I'm thinking would be really fun here is actually to go from the D down to a B, and then we shoot up to that G. So I can pull that over. So yeah, that's going to be really really kind of unexpected, because the B is that's obviously the 7, so that's under that root. So it's gonna kind of create a little bit of tension, and then you're almost going to want this 7 to resolve up to that 1, because that's what 7s want. They want to go up to the root, and then instead it shoots all the way up to this 5. So yeah, really cool. Okay, and then the 5 down to the 3, that's strong. 3 up to the 1, that's strong. So, or 8, because it's an octave high. 8 up to the 9, that's strong. 9 down to the 2, that's an octave. And finally, we've got the 9 down to the 3, which is strong as well. And then the most forgotten about melodic interval is the last note back around to the first note, which is E down to C. So that's also strong. So everything's absolutely solid now. Every single time a note moves, so every melodic interval is really strong and colorful. So this is a super solid bass line, which means we can move on to step 4, rhythm. So now that the melody is sorted, it's time to inject some life into this bass line through rhythm, and especially syncopation. So syncopation is accenting offbeats, and at the moment everything is very dun, 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 you know, running like clockwork, which is great, but we want to liven things up a little bit with unexpected rhythms and, you know, an unpredictable flow to this bass line. So whenever you're working on the rhythm of a bass line, or any melody for that matter, always go straight to your grid settings and get that onto 16th notes, because 8th notes are great, but it still creates a rather predictable rhythm. 16th notes, which you're now dividing each quarter note up into 4, that gives you so many options to create a vibrant and energetic melody. Okay, so the first thing I'm thinking is I think it'd be really cool to shorten this note we've added here, and pull this one in a little bit, and shorten it as well. So we're getting through all of that in a quarter note beat. I think that's really going to pump up the energy as we come off that root note. Okay, and then let's get this rest up, and we can shorten that rest as well. And here is exactly where I'm thinking we go into some 16th note syncopation, because you can see this rest is actually on the 4th quarter note beat of the bar. So on that that backbeat, where there's a snare usually, you know, and we'll put the drums in afterwards, but that's going to be a snare on that 4th beat, and there's actually no bass note on that. And then we pull this guy in, so that 3 comes in on the next 16th note. So it's going to be like, whoop-pow, yeah, whoop-pow. That's awesome. Okay, that's the kind of 16th note syncopation that really livens up the energy of a melody. Okay, and then let's pull this 8 over as well. and then we're going to shorten that 8 and pull this rest over. And the reason for that is that I'm really hearing this 9293 part of the melody as being one quarter note. I really love the repetition of that 9 with the 2 climbing up to the 3 below, and that kind of ping-ponging back and forth. Really cool. I like that, and I think that is going to be even more punchy if we can squeeze that all into one quarter note. So let's do that. So I'm just gonna, I just shortened them all to 16th notes, and then we're just pulling them all into one quarter note. So this is now bar 2. So bar 2 is starting with this down, super punchy ping-ponging back and forth between that kind of high register and the low register. Really amazing. So now we're actually done with the melody, but we've still got 3 beats left to finish our 2-bar bass line. So this is where I'm thinking we go back to the 1 and really anchor this whole bass line into the mode and the emotion that we've chosen. And that brings me to our final step, step 5, and that is to break up the 1, because currently we've got a whole bunch of 1 that is not doing much in terms of adding to our melody. So those long highlighted notes, those are both root notes, and what we want to do now is without changing the harmony. So in other words, we want the listener to still very much hear those roots as being roots, but what we want to do is inject a little bit more in the way of melodic interest into those notes. And the way we can do that is by playing around with the root triad. So the 1, the 3, and the 5. The 1 is vital, obviously that's our root note. The 3 is what makes harmony major or minor, so obviously that's vital. But the 5 doesn't really add anything to our harmony, so we don't even need the 5. So let's just play around with the 1 and the 3 from the C. So in other words, it's going to be the C, which is the 1, and then the E. And then by just playing around with the 1 and the 3 and the octaves of the 1 and the 3, we can create a really vibrant little melody over just those root notes, which is going to tie this whole thing together. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is slice up this 1. So I'm thinking let's start with an 8th note like that. So 2/16 all in 1, just to kind of, you know, establish that note. You don't want to just kind of hit it and move straight off it. And then let's cut this one up. Let's go to an octave. So we're going to go up to the high C there, and then down to the C there, and then let's just cut these up. And then let's go up to the 3, which is going to be bang on that second quarter note beat of the bar. So that's a backbeat again, so that's going to be a snare. Whoosh, and that sounded more like a whip snare. So it's going to be, you know, establishing that major quality, right? Because that third note is what makes it major. So that's our happy note, and like getting that bang on that snare is really going to emphasize it. I think that's going to be super cool. And then let's go up to an octave of the root, so up to that C there, and then let's throw this one up to an octave of the 3. So we're climbing from the 3 through that high root, and then up to that high 3, and then we drop all the way down to the root, the low root right here. It's really important whenever you are creating a little variation over this root, make sure to leave the very last note of that as the root, because otherwise you end up actually kind of changing the melodic movement, which we've just checked to make sure that it's all strong. Okay, and then let's change up this last one here. What I'm definitely hearing is starting an octave higher. So move that C up to here. I think that's going to be really nice to kind of take these high twos, right? So that 9 9, kind of resolving that down to this 8. That's going to sound amazing because nines or twos always want to go down to the root. So we kind of create that little melodic movement there. That's going to be really nice. And as always, we want to be thinking about motifs, those short musical ideas that we can reuse to give our melodies structure and familiarity and make them memorable. So I'm actually thinking I'm going to delete that long root note there and copy and paste what we did over the first root note. Not all of it, because we've already got a little bit there, but this bit. And I think that is going to really tie this this together. It's like a bookending the phone number. I'd like to create a little bit of syncopation and variation. So maybe I can move this low root one earlier, and then actually for the first time in this bass line, I'm gonna create this 16th note syncopation just before the quarter note beat. So the note hits just before you're expecting it. And what I'm thinking then is actually this whole fourth quarter note beat here in the second bar. I'm thinking we just have a rest on that. And that way the bass line has a little bit of room to breathe, because this is definitely a very energetic bass line. And that's going to sound really cool with the drums as well. Like the snare is going to be cracking that 4 right here. Bah! And then we've just got some nice space there. Okay, and with that we are done. Oh, and one last thing. This is the awesomeness of the white note hack. I have been thinking the whole way through doing this video that this is definitely too low. So what I'm going to do is just select all, and I'm definitely hearing it just a little higher. So we'll just do it from D. So what we've just done now is we've taken our bass line that is in C Ionian and we've just moved it up a couple semitones, and now it is in D Ionian. There you go, white note hack doing its thing. And just before I play my final Lotus Pond bass line, if you need help writing bass lines or any melodies for that matter, then please refer to my melody checklist in my Hack Music Theory for Songwriting and Producing PDF. It's literally a list, a checklist of everything you need to do to make great melodies. So you just keep that handy, go through it every time you're writing a melody, and boom, everyone's great. Okay, so I'll shut up now and let the music do the talking. Here we go. Are you ready?